this pastime.
Yes, and hello, guys, gals, and non-binary pals. Welcome to the next episode of the Noobs and Knockouts podcast. I'm Austin. I'm a knockout. I've watched a lot of wrestling.
I'm David. I'm a noob and a bit of a rebel around here because I actually have not watched a lot of wrestling. Someone say I'm a punk.
I don't know how to make CM fit in there. Anyway, today's episode will be the July 11th, 2011-ish episode of Monday Night Raw. And I just thought of this like today. But I'm going to point out and say that this episode is a follow-up to episode 6. That is titled Breaking the Fourth Wall for Fun and Profit. And I bring that up because because now that we're kind of getting into the swing of having actual storylines that we follow on this show, you know, it might be hard for a new viewer to necessarily jump into this particular episode. Or they might just like to have a little more context than I'm going to provide on this episode.
Look at you being a responsible media host.
Yeah, so yeah, it is episode 6. That's easy. You can search for that on Spotify and on YouTube. We have YouTube playlists now for all of these storylines, so you can just it's super easy to find.
I just want to point out to everyone, what a fucking MVP Austin's been about this whole thing. My whole job around here is just to say some pretty words in the back half. Austin does the whole rest, and it blows my goddamn mind how good he is at all this.
It's fine because I feel like David has the very pretty words that I couldn't do. So fine, I'll just make up for it and be super into the technical side.
Well, I don't mind helping out, but I just want to give you a shout out for all the goddamn good shit you put into this because I'm just over here watching all the stuff you do behind the scenes, and I'm like, damn, look at him go. I'm so proud.
All right, back to the episode though.
Yes.
We are now 2 weeks from the pipe bomb promo, and that is really the major thing that I will recap. That is at the end of 2 weeks ago on Raw, CM Punk's sat down on a microphone and basically broke the fourth wall a lot and referenced a lot of things that never get referenced on WWE television.
Yeah, dude. It was glorious. It was amazing. It was the most Shakespearean of heel speeches. I was very happy with it.
And it's all part of a larger story of CM Punk. His contract is running out in WWE, but he is also in a WWE championship match. So Punk is threatening that he's going to win the title, and then he's just going to quit the company and run off with the title.
Classic move. Absolutely classic move. You hate to see it.
So what happened a week from the episode that we're watching today? Basically, Punk was suspended immediately. I don't remember when they announced this I assume they announced this on social media at some point in that time frame, but on the show it starts, he's already suspended. But basically, Vince McMahon was like, yeah, fuck you, Punk, you're suspended. You're done, pal. And so this episode that aired on 4th of July, which played into a lot of things on this episode, I probably won't mention them all, but it was all very corny. You know, there was a whole feud over who would get to lead the crowd in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Oh, wait, I remember you mentioning that to me in the prep work at some point.
Yeah, because I was like, man, this is corny and dumb. But anyway, so John Cena comes out to start the July 4th episode and is all like, and does a thing that Cena does all the time, which is he likes to respond to his opponents saying mean things to him. He likes to go, well, I don't like what you said, but I respect your right to say it.
God damn. Okay. No, that's part of the reason we have John Cena as he exists today. Sure.
Yeah, but it's all very annoying because one of the things that I think one of John Cena's greatest weaknesses as a performer in his time in WWE is he never really acts bothered by anything that happens to him. And that makes it harder, in my opinion anyway, to buy into the narrative. Because you have this hero who is above it all. Gets insulted? Meh, you have a right to say that, but I disagree. Loses the match.
You see his modern filmography and he's had some very funny things where where he's able to derive comedy from how bothered he gets by things.
Yeah, yeah.
So like, why not play that up?
Right, but like it's all part of this invincible hero persona. Like lose a match, no, well I'll get him next time. He's won a world championship in WWE a dozen times, and it never really bothers him that he lost it. And it's like, well, why then? I don't care.
Yeah, no, they almost made him like too virtuous and too invincible.
Yeah, absolutely. As opposed to like an alternative is we recently watched Hulk Hogan when he lost the title. Dude was nearly in tears.
He was, oh my god, he had a fucking breakdown. It was hilarious.
It was, but it also makes you care as an audience because your champion cares.
Yeah, it made me care in like the cheesiest of ways, but at least I felt something.
Yeah. But anyway, John Cena kind of takes up this attitude of like, I don't like Punk. I barely respect him as a performer. I don't really respect him that much as a person, but this is morally wrong. Like Punk didn't do anything that, breaks TV PG rules. He just said a bunch of stuff that Vince McMahon doesn't like. So Vince McMahon punished him, and that isn't right. They do explicitly invoke freedom of speech as part of it. But that's kind of it. John Cena doesn't like Punk, but he takes up Punk's cause in this instance, and it kind of culminates in this. This started the show, and they end the show with they build up all night that Vince McMahon himself is coming to the building to confront Cena about this, and so Cena and Vince McMahon have it out, and Vince McMahon he kind of plays this like he's doing what's best for business, pal, and you need to get in line. John, nobody's more important. Nobody is more important than the WWE. No one is irreplaceable.
Yeah, no, that sounds about right for Vince.
So he holds firm in his convictions to keep Punk suspended. John Cena, he's like, fine. If this is what this company has come to, I don't want to represent this company as the champion. So he tries to surrender the WWE championship to Vince and walk out. And initially Vince's like, hey, you get back here, you son of a bitch. But then eventually when that doesn't work, Vince gets desperate and instead acquiesces to what Cena is threatening. He's like, fine, see, Punk is back. But just to make sure he get one over on Cena in the end, he says, well, Punk will get his title match, but if you lose the title to Punk, Cena, you're fired.
Oh, okay. Adding the stakes. All right.
We're adding stakes now. Like two guys who could be leaving the company, depending, storyline wise. Cena's obviously not leaving.
Yeah,
that part's storyline, but. You have this story where you don't know which of these two men will still be in WWE if either of them are by the end of the night, by the end of this whole feud.
Which I want to point something out kind of off the bat here is the one thing I will a lot of times give the WWE writers room a lot of credit for is their ability to even make obvious setups feel a little bit unpredictable because obviously the outcomes of the matches are pre-scripted, and here we have Vince McMahon telling Cena like, if you lose you're fired, and hearing that without even seeing anything, like the obvious answer is okay, so Cena's gonna win, beat the heel, and not get fired. But I also know the WWE writers room is fucking nuts, and that they could absolutely have Cena lose and then pull some like absolutely weird shit out of their asses, and find a way to get him reinstated within the week. So I want to just give a quick like shout out of praise to WWE's like unpredictability, even when the answer should be very obvious.
Yeah, and I think also what it also kind of gives this shadow of a doubt to is, like you said, there's no way that Cena's going to win, right? But like before that, you might argue it'd be a little obvious in story for Punk to win, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
he's the one threatening to win the belt and leave the company. Well, that's the more interesting angle. So surely that's what's going to happen, right?
Yeah.
But now the story goes, if Punk does that, Cena's fired. So it's like, wait a minute.
Yeah, exactly.
Maybe Cena will win and Punk will just leave a little unceremoniously, but leave nonetheless.
Yeah, they've good at they've done a good job at like layering the stakes, which I think is cool.
Yeah. And something else I also thought was cool in this episode is that like something I think that WWE writing doesn't do very enough is that they don't make it seem like this is an actual like in kayfabe. This is a fighting league where matches are kind of put together in a way that as part of filling out a show. And they don't always do that very well in the sense that like they love to do these angles where like at the start of the show, 2 guys or 4 guys will get in the ring and start yelling at each other, and then they'll have the authority figure come out and say, "Oh yeah, you guys are fighting, so tonight in the main event, you'll fight." And it's like,
Yeah.
what were you gonna do in the main event before these guys all decided to air their grievances?
Yeah, it feels a little cheap to like to point that out as like plot hole, but the fact that they rely on that trope so heavily it gets a little stale.
Which
Just
is
just from what I've seen.
Which is why I appreciate that on this episode they actually don't play on that. They announce a number 1 contenders match as to find a replacement for CM Punk, and then they go through with it.
Nice.
Alberto Del Rio wins the match to become what is considered the number 1 contender, which now adds like, what's he gonna do? Because he rightfully won a championship match, but then Cena's like, no, if I want to fight Punk, go fuck yourself.
Oh my god! And Del Rio's a great character to do that with too. It's his pompous ass doesn't always do well getting thrown by the wayside.
Yeah, so I was really appreciative that like they don't pretend like, oh yeah, Punk's gonna be back. They're gonna put the Punk match back on by the end of the night. So why do we need to act like we need a replacement? No, they acted like they needed a replacement before the story organically came back to, and Punk is back now.
Yeah, pretty much.
I was very happy.
Yeah, no, I would be too. Or I'm excited already. Like, damn, Summer of Punk, at least starting out, I'm digging it really hard.
And so I guess the other major storylines to talk about from the July 4th episode is kind of mainly everything's kind of wrapped into the build to the Money in the Bank ladder match itself. Like we already know all eight people who are wrestling in it, and so an interesting kind of, they don't always do it this way, but they kind of put together the match, and like they took a lot of pre-existing character rivalries and kind of just they're going to get all thrown in a ladder match. The biggest example would be Alex Riley and The Miz are doing their whole like Alex Riley was The Miz's protege, and then The Miz mistreated him, so Alex Riley rose up to become his own man. Like they're doing that stuff right now, and they're in the ladder match against each other. Meanwhile, you have kind of Alberto Del Rio, R-Truth, and Rey Mysterio, who are all kind of like hovering around the WWE Championship. They're all kind of they're all like fighting to be the next man up for whenever this Punk thing is resolved. So they're all in the ladder match together.
Continuing stakes, yes.
And then Evan Bourne and Jack Swagger are doing a thing where Evan Bourne is little flippy guy and Jack Swagger is big mean bully, and little flippy guy doesn't like big mean bully.
Yeah.
But they're in the ladder match together too. The really odd man out here is Kofi Kingston, who is in the ladder match, but he is currently kind of paired off with Dolph Ziggler and Vicky Guerrero in terms of like his storylines right now. No. So he feels a lot less, at least to me, he feels a lot less important to this multi-man ladder match.
I will say though, happy we're getting more of Kofi. Love me some Kofi.
Yeah, he's great.
And really love that we're getting some more Vicky.
Hey. Oh yeah, Vicky is definitely on this episode. What gross thing will Jerry Lawler say about her this week?
Oh fuck, I forgot Lawler's still around. God damn it.
Yeah, and like Lawler's cleaned up a lot of his act by the time we hit TV PG. He's now more dad joke than he is sexist thing.
And
But
racist thing, and
but he
homophobic thing.
yes, but he still makes some time to be kind of pervy on the divas, but it's not nearly as bad as it's in the 90s. But don't worry, he's still an ass to Vicky Guerrero, who like he just kind of calls old and ugly as
It's
many
the
and
small
fat
great
as many times as he can get away with it.
Mm. Mm.
On the July 4th episode, he does this long running kind of joke where he's like, "Oh, it's the 4th of July, but Dolph Ziggler thinks it's Christmas," and Michael Cole's like, "What?" And Jerry goes, "Well, Dolph Ziggler's around here looking like Santa Claus. Wherever he goes, he brings an old bag with him."
Oh no! Oh my Christ! Shut up,
It's like,
Lawler!
it's like, shut the fuck up.
Shut up, Lawler! Jesus!
But yeah, that's a thing.
Of course it is. Of course it is.
And then the Divas Championship, the Kelly and the Bella Twins, they're still going strong. It's great.
Sure.
It's not really going anywhere interesting. It's just happening.
Literally, they were doing the same shit last time we were in this era. What the?
Yes, I mean, I would think that a submission match would be a definitive end, but it's not. They're still fighting, even though Kelly has beaten the Bella Twins at least twice now. Plus, she won the tag match they were in on the July 4th episode. So, this is very one-sided, but they're not really going anywhere new here.
Then why? This is what I don't get about how the divas get treated, because on one hand, you have them being put on TV constantly, as if this was a thing that gets respect, as if this is a storyline that people care about, but then they just absolutely do nothing with it. I don't understand the logic behind any of this.
Yeah, I don't know. It's a rough going, but I've already plotted out when we're gonna get away from this era. I've already.
Oh, cool! I can't wait to finally get get another 3 minutes of Kelly and the twins just going at it for reasons.
Gonna be great.
Yeah.
And then I guess the other storyline that's kind of bleeding into Raw a lot is Mark Henry and the Big Show, and that's kind of not gone anywhere super new in that, after Mark Henry brutalized the Big Show in the cage match, Big Show has been off TV for the most part, selling the injury. So Mark Henry has just kind of been a terror on SmackDown. He wins really quickly and easily, and then he goes around and attacks innocent bystanders. He attacked in terms of the tech crew and the announcers. He's just intimidating them too.
Sure.
All part of a really strong hero character, but it's kind of spinning. It's kind of currently in the same spot right now.
I will say, at least it's only a week of limbo. It could be worse.
Yeah, it's not been very long to be in limbo, but it has been in limbo from where we were last time.
Fair. Hey, you know what? They're waiting. They were waiting for us, Austin. I appreciate it.
Yes, they're waiting for a podcast 10 years from now,
where one of the hosts just absolutely adores Mark Henry and loves whenever he shows up. So yeah, no, I appreciate that. Thank you. 10 years ago, WWE writers, you have my eternal gratitude.
Hey. Well, that about covers what we need to cover for this portion of the show. As I said, it's kind of quick because it's only been a week. There's only so much I could have needed to talk about.
It's kind of exciting though to go into something that's happened so fast after the last kind of set of stuff we did.
Yeah, for sure. We've not really had this kind of a quick. We've not ever at this point had this kind of a quick this second episode follow up to the next episode is so recent.
Yeah, no, it kind of adds a nice sense of continuity to things. So I'm excited to kind of veritably pick up where we left off.
Yep. And so we are going to now go watch the July 11th, 2011 episode of Monday Night Raw. See you guys in the back half. And we are back. We have just finished watching the July 11th, 2011 episode of Monday Night Raw. Oh man, what a opening and ending.
A roller coaster, dude. This was an episode that was really loved its backstage shenanigans and big aggrandizing speeches, and I kind of loved it. Just like um how hard it leaned into just how much CM Punk loves to talk. We're just gonna like make that the motif of the episode.
Yeah, like CM stuff where CM Punk is talking has to comprise like 30 minutes at least of an hour 40 episode.
Yeah, seriously, at the very least.
Yeah, I didn't keep too close a track. I just did notice that like when they advertised the main event segment was next, I was like, oh my god, there's still 20 minutes left on this video.
Ha! That's that yeah, no, they really I kind of go back and forth on this because CM Punk loves to talk, and I kind of like, on one hand, how kind of like slow and plotting he can be and how he talks sometimes can kind of like
Mhm.
get old, but like damn, I love the attitude about it, and I love just his persona, and I love the fact that the crowd was eating it the hell up too. Like it may feel a little like kind of overlong at times, but
Mhm.
damn if it doesn't feel in character and the character doesn't feel fun as hell.
Yeah, and you make a good point about the crowd kind of eating it up, and it's kind of like it's not necessarily surprising. I don't think if you really thought about it, but it is super cool to see like this character who is a heel, who is really like getting the crowd to buy into what he's saying because they believe what he's saying too.
Hmm. Yeah, it, they it it feels like the whole like make Punk a heel with this angle completely backfired because he kind of accidentally, or I guess on purpose in his case, spoke so much truth to power that the
Mhm.
crowd actually caught on with it, and they were like, "Hey, yeah, what the fuck? This guy rules. Fuck Vince McMahon."
Yeah, I don't know enough about the backstory of this angle to know how much intentionally he kind of becomes a good guy. They definitely lean into it. They start leaning into it late eventually
Well, yeah, that crowd
because you can't. They
they
can't
have,
ignore it.
yeah.
But I don't know how intentional it was for him to become a good guy from this storyline.
I wouldn't. Well, I kind of wonder because the WWE loves playing into the trope of the rich pompous people who think they're smarter than you are the worst, and we hate them, and you should hate all of them
Mm-hmm.
always. Fuck smart rich people.
Right.
And this is very much like CM Punk, the common man, um, just completely incarnating that whole motif.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and like it's played off in a way that like a bad guy would do, and it's done with all the same kind of like mwahaha inflections that Punk tends to have when he gets on a mic. But uh, it's written in a way that like it's undeniable that what he's saying feels good to hear and feels validating, feels vindicating. If you care at all about this kind of business and this industry having any sort of integrity. So I don't know what they were going for because the tone contradicts the words.
Yeah, I don't know what they were going for. I just know that it worked.
Oh, insanely well. And it also helps that Punk is just such uh a charismatic performer. That as much as I kind of hate to like uh go a lot like kind of be cringy and take it seriously when he said like in anybody else's hands this is just a microphone, in my hands this is a pipe bomb. I don't disagree with that statement entirely.
Mm-hmm.
He seems to have far more influence on the mic than any of his other contemporaries at the very least.
Yeah, he has an incredible charisma when he's talking. It is his 100% greatest quality across his entire career.
And I mean, on top of being an insanely gifted
He was.
athlete too.
Yeah, he's a fantastic wrestler in his own right. But but there are plenty who outshine him as an athlete and as a
Fair.
wrestler. There are very few of his contemporaries who outshine him, if anybody, depending on how like you who in terms of when he was a wrestler, who could outshine him on a microphone.
Yeah, exactly. And the thing is too, um he's so self-assured that even him and his most kind of like diabolical in these segments, you kind of can't help but feel for him, especially with the context that you gave me of like these were kind of his real feelings about the whole thing.
Yeah, he was
And
like he was deaf. Like he talks about like he kind of he frames a lot of his feelings in the story as as his frustration, and he's tired. He specifically says he's tired, and he was at this. This is kind of he was at a very he was in terms of his like he was kind of burning out in terms of his mentally from
mhm,
being in WWE at this time and kind of feeling like he wasn't being given opportunities he felt he deserved. And this was kind of one last hurrah that he was allowed to have. And so a lot of it not only feels real, but it is real. A lot of his emotions are very real right now.
and I kind of have to sympathize with him too because
Mm-hmm.
I mean, aside from kind of like the more serious business gripes of Vince McMahon is the biggest bully out there, but he has like this whole giant hypocritical like anti-bullying campaign, and the way this company is run on a whole kind of sucks. His anger over kind of being shafted for in terms of kind of like his share of the publicity pie
Mm-hmm.
um, is deeply understandable when he has such an undeniable magnetism about him. Like you can't like you cannot have a guy who's that just simply that good at attracting a crowd and then do nothing with him and expect him to like not care.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, which I mean, I guess this is their way of making up for that. But it's his anger and his frustration there is kind of palpable, which then adds to even more why this works so well and why he's able to like get the crowd so much on his side.
Is yeah, and I think that like is it. I think if nothing else, this story easily resonates with the hardcore fan base in a way that WWE doesn't always do because they don't always try to cater to that fan base.
Yeah,
But
where
this feels like Punk was saying everything that like the hardcore fans, the internet wrestling fans as they're called, he was saying everything they were thinking in 2011. That John Cena is only where he's at because he's an ass kisser. Punk is a phenomenal wrestler who's being held down. Vince McMahon is a hypocritical asshole. Who doesn't give a damn what the people want.
yeah, which the really astounding thing then is how much the writers kind of give credence to all that, because we have in this episode, I mean in past episodes too, but like this episode specifically, we have John Cena being that way and kind of giving off that whole kind of like obnoxious unearned authoritarian vibes, and we have McMahon being this petulant child who just spends the entire episode and the recap from the last episode showing off just what a kind of unhinged lunatic of a businessman he is, that he'll like swap from kind of subdued and professional to like absolutely losing it in a second, just based on the most random like triggers, the most random things
Mhm.
that get to him. So like they present from all sides this image that yeah, Punk's kind of right. And God, I hate kind of calling WWE of this era like daring or anything, but it does feel, it continues to feel kind of unprecedented that they were willing to basically turn to the camera and say he's right, you know.
Mhm. I mean, it is kind of it is kind of a little bit daring for its own time, and it is kind of cool to see how all three of the main characters here, Punk, Cena, and Vince, play off of each other.
Mm-hmm.
We've talked to plenty already about Punk as kind of as the voice of the voiceless, as he calls himself, but
Mm-hmm.
also as this voice of almost truth and anger and resentment all coming out. And then you have Cena, who he is so condescending in this episode.
Oh my god, yeah. It's like we've seen before him kind of like cut these promos where he kind of gives off this disappointed dad vibes or whatever, and you talked
Mm-hmm.
about how the crowd like really didn't like him sometimes, and I kind of didn't see that at first, but like this episode they really played hard into him just kind of being a condescending prick the whole time, and I was like, ooh,
Like,
that's not a good look.
no, the first half of the beginning of the episode, he talks to Punk, more kind of one on one as regarding their match, and he has this, and he does the kind of thing he does always does with it is the one and only response he ever has for when they do this storyline idea of like Cena doesn't deserve his spot. Me, who is the best wrestler, deserves that's his spot. He kind of does
Hmm.
the exact same promo of like yada yada yada. I work the hardest. I've won the title. I'm the champion. I've won the belts. Yada yada. Everybody says that I don't deserve it, and then I beat them.
Which he makes a fair
It
point.
is a fair point, and like this, it's kind of the number one problem of storylines that kind of play into fan perceptions of Cena, in that they don't make sense in kayfabe. In that, like, it is easy for fans to look at Cena in a critical meta eye and say, yes, he isn't really that good of a wrestler compared to many of his peers. But in kayfabe, John Cena is a 10-time world champion. You can't really make any real arguments that he isn't good.
But like, but
Sense.
with the summer of punk, we're in this weird flux because like like we're in for the past god however many years at this point we 18 years we've been in the post Cure for the Common Show world where any last semblance of kayfabe got absolutely shattered. And then we have Punk doing the pipe bomb promo, whose whole like gimmick is blurring the line between reality and kayfabe. So we're in kind of this weird limbo of Schrodinger's kayfabe, where where it's simultaneous like based on kind of what'll get the biggest reaction out of the fans will simultaneously play into like everything in our show is real reality. How do you feel about that? And also, hey, we know you guys what's happening. We know crap. I can't talk. We know you guys know what's happening behind the scenes. And we want you to get mad about that too. This is them kind of in this weird way having their cake and eating it too.
Mm-hmm.
But if you think about it for more than like 10 seconds, it makes absolutely no sense. There's no consistency present.
Yeah, and I think that somehow manages to work anyway. In
Oh
that,
no, I don't
I think,
disagree. I want
yeah.
to clarify. I don't think that's a bad thing. It's just a
Mm-hmm.
thing.
Yeah, and I think this is absolutely the best version of the like popular internet wrestler says John Cena sucks as a wrestler. Cena disagrees by pointing at the number of belts he's won. I think this is the best version of it, and I think that's because Punk is an absolute master, as I said last time in episode 6, at like blurring these lines, but not breaking them so much that they don't make sense anymore in storyline.
Yeah, and I mean, ironically, that part of the promo was kind of like when Cena felt at his least condescending because he was like making a cogent point. He
Yeah,
wasn't
but
just
don't
saying,
worry,
you watch your attitude there, bucko.
yeah, but then he'll be back later in the main event to really lean into this when he like comes to wag his finger at Vince McMahon and CM Punk.
Yeah, and then CM Punk is yeah, no, that one felt really weird because like we had this kind of great scene between Punk and McMahon, wherein like again we had that great fluctuation between like McMahon, the cool-headed professional, to like Punk would say one thing that got under his skin, he just absolutely would like flip for a second. And we had Punk, the almost like Jokerish mastermind, just in control of the situation the whole time, and it had this great kind of tension to it. It had this
And he
great like
and he
humiliation
yeah,
aspect to it.
and he knows exactly what to say to get Vince
Mhm.
McMahon to flip and thus prove Punk's point.
Yeah, no, and they use that pretty effectively. Like it was fun to see those moments where Vince would just like get up out of his chair and be like, "No, wait a second." Or didn't he flip the table?
Punk flipped the
Okay,
table eventually.
um, but then like but Cena comes in and like it was this interesting thing. It worked for me for the most part because again,
Mm-hmm.
Cena kind of like the second demon floating around in Punk's head, and like having him there to kind of embody some of that shit too worked. But there was this really weird moment that like felt way too on the nose for me, which is a weird thing to say about WWE because like
Mm-hmm.
everything's on the like it felt like cartoonishly on the nose um where Cena, yeah, he's wagging the finger. He's like, "You two are acting like children," and it was literally it cuts to like Punk and McMahon like pointing at each other,
Oh
like,
yeah,
"What are you
they're
saying?"
pointing to each other like he started it.
Yeah, no, that
Like,
was
I'm like,
that's like a weirdly like cartoony element to throw in here,
mhm.
um, and it kind of like it was this weird moment of like, why are we saying that Cena's right? Like, why are we like,
Yeah, and I feel because I also feel like a lot of the story, like other than that moment, is making Cena the bad guy as much of the bad guy as they ever let him be.
yeah,
But in
or at the
that,
very
they
least,
definitely
like a
he feels
pompous nuisance.
yeah, it makes it feel like Punk is right about what he thinks about Cena.
Yeah,
Especially in this back half of the promo where he starts getting really obnoxious and like what this thing that he brings up when he feuds with The Rock too is that Cena at this point in time, because between Punk and The Rock, he really leans into this idea of him being a workhorse and thus morally superior.
yeah.
Like he calls that in this episode. He kind of calls back to The Rock when he first came back to the WWE in 2011. He says like, finally, The Rock is home and he's never leaving again. Punk Rock's words, and Cena like takes this literally and is like, huh, see, well, where you at now, Dwayne? Which
Yeah,
to be
that kind of like
to be fair, yeah, to be fair to Cena, wrestling fans also did that at this time, and I always felt that was weird because, like, no, people, he has a very successful movie career. He is not literally coming back to WWE full time ever,
yeah,
ever.
no, don't like,
He just meant that he's not going to distance himself from WWE and ever again, like he did kind of in the mid 2000s when he was trying to get his acting career off the ground.
mhm.
Like no, like that's not what he meant when he said he's never leaving ever again. But that works, I think, for Cena being kind of like finding moral superiority in his own work ethic, and then he calls this out to Punk too by they all kind of call each other hypocrites, and I think it kind of works almost. Punk works like Vince McMahon is a hypocrite for kind of portraying himself as this as an upstanding, almost sometimes jovial businessman when he is a bully and a monster, as Punk calls it out. Cena calls Punk a hypocrite for kind of suggesting himself to be the voice of the voiceless and having and his as Cena calls it phrases it demanding the support of the people when Punk isn't even committed to staying in the company. He's
Mhm.
6 days away from quitting, and at the end of the night, he does suggest that, yeah, fuck it, I'm leaving.
Yeah.
Cena considers that a hypocrisy. I don't necessarily agree, but the show doesn't necessarily paint Cena right to begin with.
It's really interesting to me because for a lot of this episode, I don't even know if it was like the writing on purpose or if it's again just how utterly like magnetic CM Punk's personality is. But it feels the whole time like he's pretty much right. But then at the very end, like he still kind of has that like crazy evil like that that like angry heel rage quit when Cena kind of like socks him in the face.
Mhm.
For comparing him to the Yankees, which
Yeah,
is
which gets to the hypocrisy of Cena, which man, it's a lot. Basically, this whole night is some of CM Punk's most iconic work, but that in particular, that whole line and sequence of what he was going at is extremely iconic. Where he brings up that Cena's from Boston, and Cena crafts a persona around himself of at least an everyman or an underdog in many ways. And CM Punk's like, dude, you're a 10-time champion. You're not an underdog. And he goes at the Red Sox for thinking themselves to be underdogs when they're still not, which is relevant because this in 2011 the Red Sox had kind of grown into being a championship sports team
yeah.
by that point. So he is kind of on point with that. And then he explicitly says that tell Cena you've become what you've hated. You hate. You're the New York Yankees. You're the dynasty.
Ah,
And it's funny. I'm glad that I happened to mention Cena's propensity to just not let things bother him, because we see that in the show, but then we also see like what it takes to make him bothered.
yeah. Which I that was a really cool moment to see. And I was gonna say like it felt like this weird like last second about face of like saying Cena's right and Punk's wrong, but now that you kind of put it like that, I don't think I see. I think it kind of ends up on like all these motherfuckers are kind of crazy, and we're decide for yourself
Mm-hmm.
like kind of which hypocrisy is the easiest for you to swallow.
A
Which I
little
think is
bit, yeah.
ultimately still Punk's. But kind of still giving them him that like angry heelish rage quit allows him to kind of keep that edge and not just go straight off too quickly into being like he's the voice of you guys now. He's your good guy. Have fun.
Which he's not. He doesn't really fit very many. He doesn't really fit very many molds of being a good guy. Kind of the one big one that Punk fills is kind of speaking truth to power and kind of being the voice of the people is kind of the only kind of traditional good guy hero mold that he does fit.
Mhm. Um, but at the same at the same time, he still like is this conniving, manipulative, supervillain in a way, who is gonna kind of take that inkling of justification he has, that kind of I'm the only one who with the balls to call this out sort of thing, and
Mhm.
then just completely exploit it for his own gain, go completely in the other direction. Making him this kind of almost like anti Vince McMahon, where he's still the one where he's still there, like dictating ridiculous terms of a contract specifically designed to screw over, humiliate, and otherwise make miserable someone who he personally dislikes.
Yeah, and the fans eat that up because the person who Punk dislikes is Vince
Is Vince
McMahon.
McMahon.
But that still doesn't make Punk morally in the right for doing so.
Yeah, and it kind of leads to this question of like how much of this subtext was on purpose, but
Mhm.
but I also feel like if you're asking that, you can also acknowledge like even if like some of this wasn't like explicitly meant to like read like that,
Mhm.
if these layers weren't like really intended to be there, I think there's still something that like you inherently feel, that can connect you to those layers just because it's so like it's just such a chaotic situation from start to finish that like there's kind of so many emotions to grasp at that you can kind of find your own reading in this, which I think makes this even more fun to kind of like talk about and analyze, and even just like the first time watching it through just kind of like trying to wrap your head around all the different kind of moving parts here is wild.
Yeah, it was such a complex segment in a way that wrestling isn't always very complex.
Hmm.
And I'm not saying that's bad. Sometimes the simplicity of wrestling is quite good, but it is very fun to see wrestling kind of get into these kind of nuanced take here.
No, I agree. And again, even if that nuance wasn't like thought all the way through, the fact that it's kind of like there for us to analyze regardless, just kind of based on all the layers that are there, is kind of a fun phenomenon.
Mhm.
And I think too, there's this really um I'm not quite sure the right adjective for it, but this this sensation of, oh my god, um this is kind of like so new
Mhm.
in a lot of what they're doing here, like a lot of this kind of like a lot of this promo work is really unprecedented in how they present it, that it just kind of keeps you in a little bit of a shock the whole time. Like this is I'm glad in the front half I kind of mentioned this sense of tension that I got of you can never be fully sure like what the predetermined ending is going to be for the most part.
Mhm.
This was like even more so, you're not really sure what's going to happen moment to moment because they've got three very dynamic characters in there, all of whom are kind of stepping outside their usual boundaries in these kind of big ways to all kind of clash. And this could be a case of like, anything can happen. There is no really clear set path for how this could go. And that kind of adds this extra like fun sensation of
Mhm.
we have no idea what's going to happen. And kind of be along for the ride, I guess.
Oh yeah, no, definitely. Like this is among kind of the best. I've you look at like what can make like the best of wrestling and what kind of can make it great. I think that this story in this episode covers that.
Completely agree, 100%. It's which is funny because the main event didn't really even have any wrestling. Um, this was a very kind of like acting heavy show.
It was.
Um,
There are four matches, and none of them are that long, super long, or super significant.
yeah, no. So it's like it's really funny because like on one hand it's far from like the exemplary version of using wrestling to move the plot forward, because like the way wrestling was used to move the plot forward in this episode was like administrative. It was very much like all of the behind the scenes politics that goes into like putting together a wrestling show.
Mm-hmm.
um but but like the writers room just kept flexing and flexing and flexing the whole time. This is probably the most I've reacted to like line after line after line in any episode we've watched thus far, of
Mm-hmm.
just so many good lines were dropped, so many good moments were kind of put out there, um that you kind of forgot that there should probably be more fighting going on here. Um, because like yeah, they had it in there, it was satisfactory enough, and then we get to the really crazy shit. That's like just people talking at each other.
Yeah, I mean,
Uh, yeah,
I'm willing to forgive it in that like this is the go home show to a pretty major pay per view. It's generally kind of considered at worst the number 5 show on WWE's calendar, and considering that the other four, the bigger four, are like the first 4 pay per views that WWE ever had, and were the only pay per views they had until 1993. Like, to be number 5 is a big deal, and in some people's eyes, Money in the Bank is that kind of can slot in at number 4.
yeah, no,
So, so like this is a pretty big level show, relatively speaking, and so they do. And when it comes to like in ring stuff, they're kind of taking it easy because everybody is kind of in the places they want them to be at for the pay per view. So we're just kind of gonna let it stay where it's at, and kind of do our best to convince people that they need to pay $60 to buy Money in the Bank.
and like I also have this kind of view of it of, for as much as it is kind of an inherent flaw that in this episode, like, of a wrestling show, the wrestling is so secondary. While that's kind of an inherent flaw, I also kind of don't mind it because I think back to every other contemporary era thing we've watched, and what's been our biggest complaint? Filler. Filler, filler, filler,
Mm-hmm.
so much fluff, so much shit that does not matter, that drags on for so long and has absolutely nothing to do with the main plot. This was focused. This I did for not a single moment of the fighting felt like, yeah, okay, I get it. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
the whole time, um, there was no fat. The only fat was just kind of how long like Punk's monologues tend to last, and that's fine. But like, there's no like just fluff match that means absolutely nothing.
No,
So I'll kind of take it
like
over the
every like whether you like the stories involved or not, and some of them I don't. Every
well,
we'll get to we'll talk about that, the ones
we
I
will.
don't. Every match did advance a story in some way.
Yeah,
Probably the least important match was the Cena match with the tag team champions,
yeah, that was just there to show off Cena.
which like the best segue I'm ever going to get to talk about handicap matches.
Yeah, you
Because
had a
it
rant
was,
about this, and I have some thoughts. So
I
please.
do. So it was a handicap. So to be clear to everybody, it was a handicap match, which means it was 1-on-2. It was John Cena versus both of the tag team champions,
Hmm.
David Otunga and Michael McGillicuddy.
Hmm.
And Cena won. And it kind of touches on the thing I hate the most about handicap matches, which is in story, in kayfabe, everybody is a professional fighter, top of the line athlete. With that in mind, one guy should not be beating two guys, and especially not two guys who are the champions of 2v2 fighting.
Hmm.
I am strongly of the opinion that when you run these handicap matches, and WWE loves to run them, and they love to have the underdog win, that'd be the man of the lesser. It makes the larger group look like dorks because they
Yeah.
can't, because they have a 2-on-1 or sometimes a 3-on-1 advantage, and they still can't beat a guy. Like, that's the kind of, like, sure, that happens in like movies and stuff, but it happens to mooks who are intentionally written as not that good. Like, they're written to get beaten up. That's why they're mooks. And I don't think you should be making top level tag teams in the story, especially your tag champions look like mooks that can't even beat one guy, even if it's the champion.
Well, I kind of figured that would be your main issue with it too, and I'm glad it was, because kind of the thoughts I wanted to give were kind of piggyback off that
Hmm.
of I because I've never seen a handicap match
This
before.
was this what's happened. This did happen to be our first experience with it.
Yeah, I don't know how they tend to go. If I had to guess, a lot of the time it's gonna go to the one over the two because the whole felling the giant trope, just in a different form. Um, uh, um, which is kind of interesting because like I don't necessarily mind the felling the giant trope to an extent, because like they're usually pretty good at how they write those, and how sparingly they use them. Um, but like something about watching this match as just kind of like its own isolated thing felt very unrealistic. Not even just like the whole like how the hell is John Cena beating two guys. Um, but like something about it didn't feel like convincing. Like there was so and yeah, it was something more than just like the fact that it was a 2-on-1 and the one ended up winning. But like Cena wasn't really selling that well. The kind of some of the hits between him and the tag team were not really connecting for me. Just like it's something about it felt like ever so slightly off and really unrealistic, and just like so clearly a work that I'm like, how did they,
Mm-hmm.
like, at the very least they should have been like more competent in like communicating to each other how they're gonna sell this in the midst of doing it. Like it just
Mm-hmm.
it looked physically kind of unconvincing, on top of the whole like how the hell is one guy beating two, like it didn't sell that well, which
Yeah,
was kind of disappointing to watch.
yeah. I think it was a little bit half-assed in that.
Yeah.
Like it felt like, like every outside of my own annoyances with internal logic of handicap matches. It did kind of feel like a match where like everybody knows who's going to win here, Cena, and
Yeah.
everybody knows the match isn't that important. So like, who cares?
Yeah. I feel like there are some cases in which a handicap match could work. Like if we really want to play off like an up till now kind of like screwed over underdog, finding his like superpowers and just like going beast mode. Like
Yeah,
to use that once in a blue moon would be really cool, but this was not the case to use this. It like made no sense other than just like the anonymous commissioner wanting to be snarky at Cena for a little bit.
Yeah, like, and I agree. I don't want to suggest that like you can never ever do a scenario where someone wins over a group that has a numbers advantage over him.
Yeah,
like I don't think there's any trope in wrestling that you can never ever use.
Well, I mean, we kind of had that in the Brody Lee episode with Wyatt Call versus the Shield and the numbers game thing.
Yes, that was a big story of that match, and I think that was a big story of that match was being able to create numbers advantages for yourself and how that works as dynamics. But I am suggesting that WWE overuses the trope, especially in particular, overuses the handicap trope, the handicap match trope. Like it's something they do semi frequently as like a bog standard, like overcoming the odds kind of a characterization and story dynamic. And that to me just both is boring and fucks with the logic enough that it annoys me.
Yeah,
especially when the tag team champions get dragged into it. Like this also kind of goes into a personal belief of mine that like you should protect your champion, that your champions should be presented as very good, strong competitors because they are champions, and so having the champions of 2-on-2 wrestling lose to one guy just to me just makes it even worse that this is the way you did it.
Yeah, no, and like it was even more frustrating because they started off the match with the tag team dominating, obviously,
right?
And we were kind of reminded about like how talented they are as a unit, pulling off some really good moves, and then just kind of out of nowhere for no reason other than Cena just felt like it. The tides got turned.
Matches wrapping up. So
yeah, there was no story to the match. Like this was just purely extraneous. Which again, it was just like, and to the point where even Cena's submission move, the STF, which I mean, according to you, was never convincing, but like that just like was the cherry on top of this like bag of
I mean, that admittedly that one was a little bit worse than even usually it is.
Oh God!
At least like it's hard to explain this to people who are just watching this and have never seen the move and don't understand what it's supposed to look like. But basically, part of the move and the part that Cena always fucks up is that you're kind of supposed to like wrap your arm, like push your arms up into the other the other guy's chin as a lever, as kind of like a dub, is like that's where it's kind of supposed to be hurting a lot, and Cena puts it in very lightly, and so it looks extra fake and not painful. But at least usually Cena's arms are usually on the guy's chin. They're just not really pushed in anywhere. But in this match, Cena doesn't even have his arm. He's not even touching the other guy's chin. He just like has his arms looped around the guy's chin.
Yeah, no, it's like outstretched, and you're just like, what are you doing, dude?
Yeah, and I think it's been theorized before that Cena is just like, because his arms are so bulky, that makes it more difficult to make it work and not like actually hurt anybody. But it's like, dude, then just do it. Don't do that move.
Yeah, just modify the move. Do something different. This isn't hard.
Like, why are you committed to this one?
Yeah. Like, why is this your weird hill to die? I don't know. So that was it. So that match was kind of extraneous. We have another fucking Divas match, which only lasted a minute and a half.
A minute 41. I counted this
minute
time.
41,
so
and was also a lot of nothing other than just having the twins be catty toward Kelly.
Yeah, we've decided, like, I guess somebody decided that the fact that, is that Kelly as the champion has beaten the Bellas pretty definitively multiple times now. So, like, shit, we got to sell their last match against each other. I know what we'll do. We'll have the Bellas imply that Kelly is anorexic.
Yeah. What?
Which is
I remarked to Austin during the segment of Jesus, at this point, Divas matches are just how much misogyny can we fit into 2 minutes? It's a fucking marathon.
The answer is a lot, actually.
A lot. Because not only are we having again, just the general disrespect that all the divas got implicitly for how their entire program was set up. Not only are we having the Bella twins make really problematic comments about Kelly's like figure, but also we have the twins on commentary sitting next to Jerry fucking Lawler, who spends the whole time aggressively macking on them and on Kelly.
Yep.
And I'm kind of too, but like, Jesus, it's just like all of the awful.
Yeah, it was really bad, and I'm ready to move on.
Me too, because there's like nothing else to say other than just like that was pointless and problematic, and Jesus Christ, that the matches in this episode did not fucking matter.
Actually, ready to move on in a lot of contexts, in terms of this podcast, in terms of this storyline, and this feud, even not this feud, but like this match and this storyline, which thankfully, Money in the Bank is where this thing ends. So, like, thank God we can at least do something else.
Yeah. And in this time period, we got like 3 years till Divas is done being a thing. Thank Christ.
But the only part that I even liked was a bit of a neat appearance of Melina, who was one of the, I guess a standout of the Divas era, I guess, in as much as anyone can truly be a standout. Yeah. But it was kind of neat to see her in that I thought she had already left WWE by 2011, so I was like, oh, I didn't realize she was still here yet. She was still here.
Yeah. Yeah, but like, again, they get barely any sort of match. No. Kelly has to
just kind of wins.
Yeah, just kind of wins pretty easily because, of course, she does. This part stuck out to me. She did a stink face on.
Okay. So
on Melina.
People who don't know don't know wrestling moves. A stink face is when your opponent is sitting in the corner and you back up and you shake your ass all up in their face.
Yeah.
Made famous by Rikishi, who was Samoan and had a very fat ass. And so it was it was very much, even when he was a regular wrestler, it was a whole lot of like a humiliation thing of, oh my God, this fat dude is forcing you to just inhale his ass. But it's being used as a women's thing for titillation, maybe. It's hard to tell because Kelly does a very bad one in that. I'll let David finish explaining.
She there was no like pressure to it. There was no anything. It was just like she kind of like vaguely like shook her butt on Melina's face very lightly, and just like to the point where it was pretty. You could kind of assume, at least I assumed, that Kelly was probably. It came across as like she was really uncomfortable doing that move, which I think is just a great encapsulation of the entire Divas era of all these women who had so much talent and potential to be really impressive in the ring, just getting absolutely nothing. And just kind of being forced to do their own version of jobbing by suffering humiliation and degradation, put down and humiliation and degradation, all because they thought they might get a little bit of extra money out of some dudes in the audience being horny over fitness models. Like
Yeah,
that was it. That's the whole point. That's the whole thing. And it's so encapsulated in just that one move, and it's painful to watch. It's painful to watch.
yeah.
It's sad to talk about. Jesus Christ.
All right, moving on, new
Yeah.
storyline. Yeah, let's talk the Money in the Bank stuff, which
All
I
right.
thought was not
That was the
necessarily
highlight
groundbreaking, but
match.
not bad. Not bad, I don't think
I would say that was the highlight match of the episode.
it was.
Um,
It
just
was
because
a very low bar to meet that, but
it was, and it wasn't a particularly like tense or high stakes match or anything. Again, because all these dudes are just going to be going at it again next week for the pay per view. This is just kind of like a precursor that the anonymous commissioner just
right.
decided he wanted to put on the second one of the episode. I should. Point out.
I'm also glad that I casually brought up the concept of like it doesn't feel like they planned anything before the episode and like what the fuck they would like asking your storyline logic of like what would they have done if everyone just didn't have a predisposition to stand in the middle of the ring and air their grievances.
Yeah.
Because yeah, they use this trope in three ways in this episode. In that the CM Punk contract negotiations at the end is, at the very least, Punk brings it up on air as part of his promo as a thing he wants to do before it's announced as that's what's going to happen. So it's kind of played off as like Punk came up with the idea on the spot. And the first match with Cena and the tag champs is an impromptu match. And then they do the thing, which I was telling David. David. I was kind of messing with him this whole segment of like playing. Like they use a lot of the very common tropes that they do for Money in the Bank ladder match buildups of like, and I was making fun of it, as in like they have it starts with the Miz sitting on a ladder next to the Money in the Bank briefcase hanging down,
directly under it.
Yeah, like I was like, that's the thing they do all the time. And then, of course, he starts talking shit, and everybody else eventually wanders out and starts talking shit, which was all fine. And then it leads to them having a match, which is the trope he talked about. Is the general manager was like, well, there's 6 of you in the ring, so let's have a match.
Yeah, which doesn't even kind of make its own version of sense because 7 of them showed up. And we're just kind of leaving Alberto Del Rio out.
Alberto Del Rio just like hangs out in his car, and he's like, well, I guess I'm not in the match.
Yeah, but then he comes in at the end anyway and wrecks shit.
Yeah.
I also want to throw in that like this whole time, like the entire stage, not just the ring, but like the stage around it too, was like adorned with ladders, and like
they're really
nobody used them.
Symbolism of they're like really trying to show you like, hey guys, remember how there's a ladder match?
Yeah.
At this pay-per-view?
Yeah, and like again, there's not too much to talk about for the match itself. Like there wasn't a whole lot of impressive work that went on. It was pretty standard. I can't really think of any like big like work things to talk about. But then the highlight comes in that like for some reason, Alberto Del Rio comes in after just kind of like getting excluded from the
when the match ends, they do the thing, which I also made another trope I made fun of like in tag matches when chaos devolves, like everyone starts hitting their big moves on each other in succession, and they do that after the match, which I was like, oh, that's neat. They don't always do it then; they usually do it before the match ends, but they do it at the end, and then Del Rio just runs in with a ladder and just starts nailing everybody with it.
Yeah, no. Well, I want to say like even the submission was really low key. Like who was it? It was Riley pinning Miz, right?
No, he pinned Swagger. He pinned
Swagger.
He just like stopped Swagger from doing his big move, and then he hits Riley hits Swagger with his big move, and then wins, and that's it.
Yeah, like the whole thing was like weirdly subdued. Once again, Alex Riley's here for Austin to be disappointed in his existence.
Yeah. I will say it in his face.
I mean, the most fun part of this again was like the promo cutting beforehand.
Yeah, it was a lot.
Because everybody playing their like favorite, everybody playing like their kind of best hits of character beats. And it all played out pretty well. And it does crack me up that Alex Riley showed up and got absolutely nothing like on the mic.
No,
Like,
Riley didn't talk. Riley just ran out to try to kick the Miz's ass, and then that was it.
yeah, and then Del Rio shows up.
Which also I wonder, like, why'd he wait? Because the Miz was the first man out, and Riley was the sixth.
Yeah, and like,
what was he waiting on?
maybe he was just like really far backstage, and he's like, "Oh shit, that's my cue," and was like dashing all the way.
Or he's just really polite, and was like he realized that the other four men wanted to talk, so he's like, "I will just let them say their pieces, and then I will attack."
I don't want to be a bother, but like, if you guys could finish up so I could kick the Miz's ass, that'd be kind of cool. Thanks. Thank you. Man, oh boy, I just pulled out a David special right there. But I mean, the most fun part was getting to see their personalities on display beforehand. Again, the motif of the episode being, it's all about the talking today, baby.
Yeah, it's not. The matches aren't important today.
Yeah, I mean,
pay-per-views on pay-per-views on Sunday. Buy it. Nobody cares about the wrestling.
This is the setup. This is the precursor. Of course, we have to do it this way. And I mean, again, it's a fun parade of personalities. But then just when they start fighting, there's that's some fighting, all right. And again, it had its cool moments, but like,
yeah. Oh, by the way, I forgot that they set up another match on the show that was seemingly not written in beforehand. Yeah. I forgot about this. The
only scripted match on this show was the Divas. Oh no!
The only match that seemingly was set up before the show started was the Divas match.
Kill me.
That was the only thing on the whiteboard. But yeah, so they do this backstage skit where like Vicky is trying to like coach Dolph into making the absolutely insane pitch of, what if you fired CM Punk and John Cena? Which
Dolph, also I should point out, like at this point in the episode, like they're like McMahon is on his way because he's been challenged to a live.
Yeah, that's what I said, is that he was on his way.
Yeah.
So they're like, he's coaching him up. So because the idea being that Dolph Ziggler is the United States champion. So if CM Punk is fired, then Dolph Ziggler is the top champion left.
And the punchline of this skit is apparent from the moment it starts.
Right. But eventually it devolves into like making jokes about Vince McMahon.
Yeah, it was Vicky, Dolph, and who's the third?
Oh yeah, Drew McIntyre shows up. They don't really introduce him at all, but he shows up to also do some bad impressions and make some jokes. And then of course they do exactly what you expected them to do, where Vince McMahon slowly comes up behind Vicky, but Vicky doesn't see it, so she keeps doing the jokes, but Dolph and Drew see Vince, and so they stop.
Although they put it up in a really dumb way, because Dolph and Drew just kind of like freeze, but like not very like noticeably. And like we don't see Vince approaching until he like gets on screen.
Like, no, yeah, like they don't like let it linger that Vince is there.
Yeah, it's the worst version of this visual gag ever. And from like the most predictable, the fact that it's gonna be the punchline. Like, why?
But anyway, so like I'm kind of like how did Vince hear any of what they were saying? Because he's not there until he gets there. But basically, Vince shows up, and then they do the thing where they're like, where Vicky's like nervous, as sure like, did he hear me? And then like he references the gags they were doing. It's like, yeah, he heard you. Yeah. And so he sets up another handicap match, 2 in 1 episode, y'all, of Drew McIntyre and Dolph Ziggler versus The Big Show, which is significant because The Big Show has been off TV for 2 weeks. As I mentioned before, and that handicap match is okay. Like, okay, to cycle back to times I'm more okay with a handicap match is the Big Show being involved, because the Big Show is so gigantic compared to everybody else, I'm more willing to suspend my disbelief on this one that, yeah, he could beat two guys.
And we have a messy ending in this one too.
And
That
the match and the ending doesn't, and the match doesn't matter. Like, he beats the shit out of him, and then eventually he chases Drew McIntyre up the ramp, and it ends in a double count out, but that's not really emphasized because it's not important. Where Big Show straight up tries to like slam Drew McIntyre into like the stage like setup.
Yeah.
Until Mark Henry just comes trucking out of nowhere.
Boom!
And knocks Big Show and himself off the stage and into. I made fun of it because they land on a blatant crash pad, but I'm okay with that because, you know, safety.
Yeah.
And I don't really think that detracts from the oh holy shit.
The great visual of Mark Henry stampeding in and just yeeting Big Show
off the stage
again.
Yeah, we have the long drawn out segment, a relatively long not as drawn out as Santa Claus, mind you,
yeah.
But a little long of like the EMTs and the referees coming down to like check on both guys and try to like get a medical help, and Mark Henry ends up we do end up seeing Mark Henry walk off under his own power.
Yeah, but like. All that mattered was the cool visual in that of just continuing the Henry Big Show feud, and
it's a whole lot of really big dudes slamming into each other violently.
And as much as I kind of hate to admit this, that's just kind of cool on its own.
I know, I like it a lot.
Basic, but it's so much fun because they're such good physical performers, and I love it.
Mm-hmm. Good times.
God, yeah, no. That was like the one time this episode that we had really effective silent storytelling, just because we already know like the history between the two of them, and again because their physicality is both so on point that so much is communicated with just movement, just like physical expression, which was a nice little shakeup. Again, probably added to how cool it felt in the moment. And yeah, I just love me some Mark Henry.
Yeah, Mark Henry when he at his best is a delight.
Yeah, no. So it's just kind of astounding how and again, it's a lead up to a pay-per-view. So of course, but like this is the first episode we watched where like none of the fighting matters. None of it. Not a single fucking match matters.
And weirdly enough, like you said earlier, but weirdly enough, I was okay with it.
Yeah. Well, because this isn't like that's not a common thing for them to do. And it's sparing enough that instead of being like why are we wasting so much time talking on a wrestling show, even though I love like talking on my wrestling shows, believe you me. It's such a rare occurrence that it feels just kind of like a nice change of pace, because again, the alternative under Vince McMahon's 2010s WWE is just all of the fucking filler that just drags on and means nothing. At least here we had like, again, it's kind of like what we talked about in our very first episode of there's kind of like that through line of the plot throughout the episode that kind of like stays pertinent. But also like that beginning and that main event took up so much time and also kind of so much energy that it kind of made up for the fact that all the fighting was a whole lot of nothing. And even kind of made it more entertaining than if we had like fight-based storytelling more in this episode, because again, the way they were doing the talking was so unprecedented for the time that you just kind of get wrapped up in that.
Yeah, like CM Punk, John Cena, and Vince McMahon are shining stars in an otherwise kind of mediocre episode.
Yeah.
And so, like, they almost kind of shine brighter from being the only things in this episode really worth going out of your way to see. And I would definitely recommend going out of your way to check out this the work those three men were doing in this episode.
Absolutely. I mean, Punk continues to be a favorite character of mine. I need to like kind of go through and create a ranking of some of my favorites because I have characters that have like
Mhm.
been becoming my favorites over the course of this show. Um, Punk is definitely one of them for really good reason. It was kind of fun to have to not like Cena in this episode, if only for the kind of contrast of like, dang, I really like him in like the work he does now. So it's kind of cool to go back to a time where that act
Yeah,
was a lot less defined.
2021 John Cena is well liked both in and out of wrestling at this point.
Yeah,
So
and again, for good reason.
yeah, for absolutely good reason. Don't get me wrong. So like it sometimes can feel a little trippy to go back to like 2011 and
Yeah.
before, where like Cena is not nobody cares about him outside of wrestling, not really.
Mhm.
And in wrestling, dude is the most hated top good guy WWE has ever had.
Yeah. And then for our third player, we just have an excellent use of your Vince McMahon.
Mm.
Not too overstated, not too overblown, just a really good kind of avatar of hate, but also uh not so much so that he is like the clear-cut bad guy.
Mm.
It's Vince McMahon feels like at his most effective. Like okay, uh, on one hand, it's very validating to see Vince McMahon be the clear-cut bad guy and just see everybody shit on him constantly. I love
Mhm.
that. I
Yep.
I I can never get enough of that. But that being said, it's a really interesting angle and one that I'm really glad I got to see of everybody here kind of sucks. And this kind of goes beyond just McMahon bad and that makes WWE bad. Like, no, y'all are kind of egomaniacs, and that's the point of why we watch this. But this kind of threw it into a fun stark contrast of like, we don't usually tend to acknowledge this, and here we
Mhm.
are kind of taking the stance of hey, all your faves are problematic.
Yep.
Deal with it, I guess.
Punk is much more self-centered than he usually than he tries to let on sometimes, and
Mhm.
Cena is absolutely up his own
He's
ass.
an imperious ass. And of course there's just McMahon being the unhinged, power hungry megalomaniac who can't handle the fact that he's getting a taste of his own fucking medicine.
That like Punk, for as much as Punk was laying on these ridiculous demands, he could get away with it because Punk has a point that that he is a real threat here.
And
Uh,
especially after
because he's not wrong that if he were to win the title and leave, then Vince McMahon looks like an asshole and it looks like a buffoon for somehow not having your WWE champion under contract. And so, what choice then does McMahon necessarily have than to let Punk get whatever he wants? So both guys are contractually, are ready to go.
and especially the week after we spent an episode talking about the Montreal screw job,
Mm-hmm.
seeing McMahon in that position where he's been even if it's completely fictional, even if this obviously all scripted and staged, the fact that A, there's a little bit of an inkling of truth to that, and B, we're getting to see kind of a physical representation of man getting put into a position that his slimy ass cannot weasel out of is admittedly really gratifying to watch.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So like this episode was a great highlight of the WWE writers room at its writeriest. And I'm glad we watched it because I love me some CM Punk. Summer of Punk so far has been great. Um and it is fun to see the writers play meta in a pretty smart way.
Mm-hmm.
Especially after again a week where we talked about the 90s, the Vince Russo era, where whether or not the meta worked was a lot more hit or miss.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, utterly gratifying.
Yeah.
So overall, this was in a way an underwhelming episode, but in another way, absolutely worth every second we sat through to get to those really sweet parts.
Mm.
That of seeing everybody's personalities come out in full swing. Everybody's an asshole. Welcome to the fun of our world.
Yeah, I think I agree with that summation.
Delightful.
Yeah, and so what are we gonna do next time?
Yes, lay it on me. Give me that preview,
All right,
baby.
well, let's see here. I need to use some I need to pull up some lyrics again.
Oh no,
I don't.
Austin's got another poem for us, y'all. Strap in.
All right. People try to put us down, talking about my generation, just because we get around to some bad wrestling, talking about the new
Oh
generation.
my God.
We are going to Monday Night Raw in only its second year in existence, May 1994, for the start of a new storyline that I'm kind of keeping under wraps right now because I want to see. I'm going to be honest, I'm kind of trolling David a little bit here in that I want to see David's genuine reaction when he realizes what this story beat is.
Oh
What
no.
this storyline is.
Oh
It is
no.
infamous. This is an infamous storyline of this period of time.
Oh, you piece of shit. Oh, okay. That I still have no idea like what this could possibly be, but I know why you're doing this. And that's because it's really funny to see to see me react negatively in a big way to things that I really hate, and you just want to milk me for that content, you devious ass.
Yes, I feel like this has been 12 episodes of me, whether we succeed or we not, I'm trying to show you good wrestling here.
Oh,
Screw
no.
that. Let's delve into the bad.
Oh,
And I'm trying to show the bad.
fuck.
We're going to the 94. We're going to the new generation.
Oh no. Don't you do this to me, Austin. Oh, Jesus. All right. Fucking
All right,
fine.
let's go to the plugs.
All right, I'll brace myself. Jesus Christ. All right. My friends, my dear friends, thank you all once again for listening to our humble little podcast. We hope you had a good time. We know we definitely did. If you want to keep listening to us, if you've just stumbled upon us for the first time, or if you have somehow forgotten how to continue to access our episodes, you can find us in 4 very wonderful places. You can find our podcast on YouTube. You can find our podcast on Spotify. You can find our podcast on Apple, and you can find our podcast on Google. Subscribe to us on YouTube. Follow us on the podcasting platforms. Leave us reviews. Comment. Just anything to drive our engagement up. We greatly appreciate it, especially if you're enjoying yourself. You could leave us a nice little review. We'd greatly appreciate that. If you want to follow us on socials, you can find us on Twitter at Noobs and Knox Pod. That's Noobs, the letter N, Knox Pod. We can also, if you want to reach out to us to kind of give us feedback on the show, make suggestions, ask questions, anything like that, you can email us at our Gmail, noobs and knockouts pod at gmail.com. That's noobs and knockouts pod at gmail.com. As always, thank you so much for tuning in with us, and we hope we'll see you again next week.
Yep. See you guys next time.
Later.